bear who's 30 years old. Andy gave this to me before she went off to college, so I would have something to hug while she was gone. I brought a bunny holding a lamb that I got 20 years ago from a friend of mine on Easter. And my two granddaughters have loved these two stuffed animals so much. And about 5 years ago, a friend gave me an elephant. And when I did this message last week at Presbyterian, I've admitted on Facebook that I did it last week. I didn't have a cow. But Friday I got a cow. My friend from the Prairie Church brought me a cow so I would have a cow for today. So the title of the message this morning is, Let's Be Cows. I'm going to talk about cows, capital C, period, capital O, period, capital W, period, S. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about cows. So if there's any cows out there listening, or listen in the future on through the video, you're in the limelight for at least a few minutes this morning. I would ask what you know about cows, but I might better start in a different place because you might know a whole lot more about cows than I do. I'm a city kid. But let me start with a few stories. Jane Kober owns a ranch in the Flint Hills. And in the mid-90s, this is where I had the retreat center in the Flint Hills. In the mid-90s, Jane was a member of the Kansas East Board of Ordained Ministry for the United Methodist Church. This board was made up of laity and pastors who interviewed potential clergy, or as I call them, wannabe pastors, or pastors wannabe. This board met for 3 to 4 days in February, then they took a break and they came back for 3 to 4 days in March. Now, Jane was a very busy rancher during this time of the year. She did most of her calving at that time in January and February. So she met with the board in February, and while she was home for that month, 3 events happened. The first one, a mama cow. Now, my son-in-law tells me that's redundant because if it's a cow, it's a mama. But Jane called them mama cows. This mama cow had a calf die at birth, a stillborn calf. Jane had women on the ranch at that time with Prairie Women Adventures and Retreat. That was a program that was there before I came with the retreat center. She had women come from all over the country to mend fences, to brand the cattle, to feed the chickens, whatever was needed to do. And some of these prairie women tried to attend to this mama cow and her dead calf, but the cow would not let these women come close to her. So Jane, as the rancher, said, just watch, I'll show you how to do it. She was going to show these city slickers and these newbies how to take care of a mama cow that lost her calf. But that mama cow would not even let Jane get close to her. So Jane stepped back and said, okay, mama, you do your grieving, and then I'll come back later and take her from you. Second event, there was another cow from another herd in the area that got put in with a small herd of Jane's cattle. The cows in that herd totally ignored the newcomer, much like we do sometimes. Jane did everything she could to mix this cow in with the crowd, but the herd stubbornly ignored the stranger. There was no hospitality there. The third event, there was another cow in distress during this month. For this one, it was during delivery. She was having some struggle trying to give birth to her calf. Jane even had to call the vet, which she seldom did, but she called the vet to come out to care for her. And then Jane attentively checked on this cow every day for a good 2 weeks. So when the board met again in March, Jane spoke specifically to the pastors in the room, telling them that her job as a cattle rancher was a lot like theirs as a pastor. She visited the grieving, the mama cow with her stillborn calf. She took care of the outcast, that lone cow in a strange herd, and she made hospital visits to that mama cow who had a difficult delivery. She did much like what pastors do. The main difference, she said, though, was if she got unhappy with any of her congregation, she could just turn them all into Big Macs.
Oh.
That was a joke. I thought it was funny. Anyway, not supposed to laugh at your own jokes. I enjoyed being out at James Ranch and having the cows in the pens at the retreat center for about 2 or 3 years. There was a cattle pen just right off across the gravel drive from the main house and the bunkhouse. I didn't know this, I discovered that cattle are very curious creatures. One day while I was raking leaves along the cattle pen fence line, I looked up and there were 12 pairs of big brown bovine eyes looking at me, staring at me. And let me tell you, for a city kid, it was a little bit unnerving. I admit that I went online to find out a little bit more about cows for this message. If there's any folks in here that have worked with cattle, they'll have to tell me if my information is correct or not. I want to believe what I've learned from this website. I learned that cattle are gentle giants. They're large in size, but sweet in nature. I learned they're curious and they're clever. They're very social animals that form complex relationships, much like dogs form in packs. Like many animals, cows form strong maternal bonds with their children, their calves, and on both dairy farms and cattle ranches, mama cows, again, I know that's redundant, they can be heard crying out for their calves for days after they're separated. A cow contentedly chewing her cud may look like she doesn't have a care in the world, but there's a lot going on behind those big brown eyes, I hear. Cows are as diverse as cats and dogs and people. Some are bright, others are slow learners. Some are bold and adventurous, others are shy and timid. Some are friendly and considerate, others are bossy and even devious. Research has shown that cows clearly understand the cause and effect relationship. Like humans, cows can quickly learn to stay away from things that cause them pain, like electric fences and some unkind human beings. According to the Humane Society of the United States, if an individual cow in a herd is shocked by an electric fence, the rest of the herd will become alarmed and quickly learn to avoid it. Only a small fraction of the cattle will ever be shocked. Research has shown that these animals have impressive memories. Cows remember their homes and can find their way back to their favorite spots. According to one report on cow behavior, cows remember where things are located. They can remember migration routes, watering holes, shelter, and the location of their newborn calf. Researchers also report that cows can remember the best eating spots in a pasture and that they use their spatial memory to guide them back. Now, when I was out on the ranch near Matfield Green, Jane taught me about seeing one cow laying down in a pasture and there'd be a bunch of babies around her, and that cow was the nursemaid or the babysitter. Did you know that? I didn't know that. And this one cow would watch the babies while the other mamas went out to eat. And I thought that was fascinating. A herd of cows is similar to a pack of wolves with alpha animals and complex social dynamics. Each cow can recognize more than 100 members of the herd, and social relationships are very important to them. Last week I had a parishioner at the Presbyterian Church say that they had gone out with a brother-in-law, I can't remember where it was north and east of here, but they were loading cattle onto a semi-truck, a cattle truck, and they couldn't figure out why the cattle broke themselves up into 4 or 5 different herds. And this is the reason. They recognize 100 members in the larger herd and they hang out with them because of the social dynamics. I thought that was cool. I'm a city kid. Cows will consistently choose leaders for their intelligence, their inquisitiveness, their confidence, their experience, and their good social skills, while characteristics like bullying, selfishness, size, and strength are not recognized as suitable leadership qualities. Cows form close relationships with some members of their herd. The relationships between mothers and daughters are especially strong, and calves bond with others in their peer group. Researchers at Bristol University in the United Kingdom found that cows have best friends and cliques, just like humans do. The social relationships between cows influence many parts of their daily lives. For example, when the herd settles down for a nap, each cow's position and the order in which they lie down is directly related to their status in the herd. Cows are emotional animals that have likes and dislikes. Cows can use their body posture and their vocal sounds to express a whole range of emotions, including contentment, interest, anger, and distress. These gentle giants mourn the death of those they love, even shedding tears over their loss. Now, I never saw the tears, but I did see a herd grieve for the death of one of their own. I was out at the ranch, and a cow had died, and Jane pulled it over to the tree line where there was some shade for the sake of the rest of the herd, because she knew that they would come and stand by her and grieve. And then several days later, Jane came back and took the dead cow away. Now, I admit that this information might be a little bit biased because I found it on goveg.com, a website for vegetarians. So there might have been a little bias in the way they presented the information, but I still found it fascinating. From this website anyway, it appears though humans and cows have a lot in common. Therefore, the sermon title, Let's Be, capital C, period, capital O, period, capital W, period, S, may make a little more sense. Let's be cows. The thing is, though, the message for today actually comes from Hebrews 12, verse 1. Let me read it to you again. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us. We are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. C-O-W. And who are these witnesses? Well, if we look at chapter 11 of Hebrews, we find names of folks like Abel, Enoch, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Rahab. These are the saints of the faith. Some have questionable experiences in their lives, like we know Moses was a murderer, Jacob a thief and a trickster, Rahab a prostitute, yet they are all named as folks who by faith did what they were called to do by God. They are the saints of the faith. They are the great cloud of witnesses. Now, I'll tell you that when I was in seminary, I was once called weird by a classmate. I've been called other things in school, but I was called weird because we were asked by the professor if one could take communion alone, say on a deserted island. And I said, of course I could. Because I would not be alone. I would be surrounded by that great cloud of witnesses. My classmates' understanding of communion was that it was communion, done in community only. I've always believed in that great cloud of witnesses, even before coming into the Christian faith. I believe the cloud of witnesses includes not only those folks listed in Hebrews, but all those who came before me, and for me, especially my mom. And that great cloud of witnesses includes those who surround me, those who care about me, those who have stuck with me, those who have prayed and laughed and maybe even fought with me, those who have circled around me, held my hands, kept me strong with their faith, those who took me to the doctor, brought me soup, or sent cards or called when I was sick, those close to me, especially my daughter Andy, my granddaughters Allison, Natalie, and Anna, my soul sister Hazel, my friends Renee, Pam, Sonia, Brian, Jane, Kim, Judith. What are the names of those who make up your cloud of witnesses? I want to invite you to bring them to mind as I share the revised a little bit words of the Mark Schultz song, Cloud of Witnesses. I had to change it just a little bit to help it make sense for what I'm doing here, but I invite you to think about those who've gone before you or those who are surrounding you now. And maybe those in the future, maybe there's somebody expecting or a wedding coming up or something. So think about those who make up your great cloud of witnesses. The song goes, watch them running down the aisles, children's time, Sunday morning. Preacher asked them who they loved. They all smiled and started pointing to their mom, dad, teacher from their kindergarten class. Each and every one have just become a cloud of witnesses that would see them through the years, cheer them with a smile, pray them through the tears. A cloud of witnesses that would see them to the end, shower them with a love that never ends. A cloud of witnesses stuck together through the years, best of friends that faith could foster. So when they found out one of them heard the news that he lost his father, they ran to him, prayed, and put their hands upon his head. Slowly, one by one, have all become a cloud of witnesses. As they sent above a prayer, took a hold of hands, circled round a friend, a cloud of witnesses. With a faith just like a rock, helped him give his father back to God. So when it comes the time heaven calls, they'll come running to see the ones who've gone before, who ran the race and made the journey home, to find waiting for them at the finish line, cheering happily. They will run, they will see a cloud of witnesses lined up on the street of gold as they run that final mile that leads them to the throne. They see God upon the throne, and as they fall into God's arms, they know they're home in a cloud of witnesses, surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. I hope you thought of some people. And my other hope is that at some time today or this week, you'll share with somebody who those people are in your cloud of witnesses. I also invite you to consider the idea that you just may be in somebody else's cloud of witnesses. Now, I posted on Facebook a video of the sign that they had in the parking lot at the Presbyterian Church last week. The communications coordinator spent 5 slides publicizing this particular message, and I had several responses. The sign started out, Reverend Billie Blair, Let's Be Cows, Sunday, 10 o'clock. The next one said, it had pictures of cows, and it's like, huh? We're going to be in a sermon? And the next one said, no, silly, it's capital C, period, capital O, period, capital W, period, S. And the next slide said something, it had 2 cows with long flowing hair saying, huh, what's it about? The next one said, you just have to come see. And then the last slide was, again, it had clouds with green grass with a cow on it, and it said, come here, Reverend Billie Blair, let's be a cow. So that's what the signs, and I posted them it was on a video, I posted it on Facebook, and I had several responses. One was from my daughter's best friend, who said the sermon title was intriguing enough that she'd like to come to Pratt from Lindsborg for church. And another woman from Wichita that I didn't know very well said she thought the same thing. I told her I feared that the sign was more interesting than the sermon. She said she thought I'd be worth it anyway, even before she saw the sign, which touched my heart. I told both women they could see it on YouTube, and the third said, if I lived in Pratt, I would be a Pastor Billie groupie. I call these folks members of my great cloud of witnesses, my capital C, period, capital O, period, capital W, period, S. You know, maybe I'll change that to my great cloud of groupies. They'll be my C.O.W.s. Amen. I will tell you that the woman that said she would be my groupie if she came to Pratt sent me a text yesterday that said, I saw your message, Billie, and let me tell you that I am one of your cogs.
Oh.
So I encourage you to think, to remember that great cloud of witnesses surrounding you, and consider the idea that you might be in someone else's great cloud of witnesses, and what an honor that is to be in someone else's cloud of witnesses. If you join me in prayer.